Imagine this. You've just spent, I don't know, a small fortune booking what you think is going to be this completely seamless, ultra-relaxing island getaway.
Right, you've got the whole picture in your head.
Exactly. You've paid for the flights, you've secured this beautiful hotel room, you step out of the airport terminal with your luggage, ready for the beach, and you immediately realize something totally shocking.
Let me guess. The transit situation.
Yes. You are legally forbidden from renting a car. Period. And that taxi waiting at the curb to take you to your resort, that's going to cost you like $70 just to cross the island.
Oh, yeah. Welcome to Bermuda.
Welcome to Bermuda, Deep Dive listeners. It really is the ultimate cold water shock for the uninitiated traveler, isn't it?
It absolutely is. I mean, you arrive expecting this breezy Caribbean-style drop-in vacation, right? And instead, you just hit this absolute wall of deeply entrenched, highly regulated friction.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're unpacking today. When we usually talk about booking a vacation, there's this underlying assumption that you're buying, like a neat, self-contained package of relaxation.
Right, you just mentally check out the second your credit card clears.
Totally. But the source material we are diving into today, which is this highly detailed, intensely numbers-driven travel dossier auditing Bermuda, it makes a really bold claim right out of the gate.
It really does. It basically argues that Bermuda is not just a simple beach holiday.
No, it calls it a premium logistics puzzle, wearing a beach holiday's clothes.
I love that phrasing. It's so accurate.
It's like, okay, think of it like buying a ticket to an exclusive, ultra-luxury gala. You get the invitation, you see the gorgeous marketing with the pink sand, and you pay this massive entry fee at the door. You think you're in.
And you're not.
No. You walk inside, and you realize, wait, I have to pay a fortune just to check my coat. And a single drink costs what a full meal would cost back home.
Before long, you realize you're basically paying a premium for the very air you breathe in there.
Exactly. Which is why this deep dive is so critical right now. We're looking at a destination that operates under a completely different set of, well, economic and structural rules than almost anywhere else you can easily get to from North America.
Yeah, and to survive it and to actually enjoy it, which is the goal, right? You have to understand the mechanics underneath all that pretty pink sand.
And the timing of this audit, it isn't random. We are looking at a massive financial inflection point happening literally right now, specifically concerning the 2026 and 2027 travel seasons.
Right. The data shows that the island is currently in the active process of pricing out the middle class.
But, and this is a huge but, there is a massive hotel reopening slated for the second half of 2026. And the dossier suggests that might just violently shift the entire landscape for anyone booking a trip for 2027.
To truly grasp what that shift means, though, you have to understand the two fundamental realities of this island. These dictate every single price tag you will encounter.
Okay, lay them out for us.
First, there is an 80% import rule. Roughly 8 out of every 10 things consumed on the island have to be shipped in across the open ocean.
Wow, 8 out of 10 things.
Yeah. And second, there are strict logistical laws, like that absolute ban on tourists renting cars you mentioned earlier.
Right.
These aren't just quirky island rules, you know? They are foundational economic drivers.
So our mission for you, the listener, today is pretty simple. By the time we are done unpacking this material, you are going to know exactly, down to the dollar and the day of the week, whether Bermuda fits your budget, your timing, and your psychological travel style.
Because if it doesn't, this island will quietly break your wallet in 48 hours.
Oh, without breaking a sweat. So let's dig into this macroeconomic shift that's happening right now. The statistics from 2025 in the research are just striking.
They really paint a picture.
They do. The average daily hotel rate on the island climbed 10.1% in a single year, and total visitor spending hit $550 million.
But there's a catch, right?
A huge one. Here is the data point that literally stopped me in my tracks. While spending hit $550 million, air arrivals actually slipped by 1.9%.
It is such a fascinating divergence. I mean, when you see a destination where total spending skyrockets by $500 million and hotel rates jump by double digits.
But the actual physical number of human beings arriving on airplanes goes down.
Exactly. You are looking at a textbook macroeconomic case of a tourism economy successfully squeezing more money out of fewer people.
So they're looking at the math and realizing, hey, we don't need 1 million people paying $100. We want 100,000 people paying $1,000.
Precisely. And it's born out of absolute geographical necessity. Bermuda is a 21-square-mile rock sitting entirely alone in the Atlantic Ocean.
You just can't infinitely scale mass tourism there.
You really can't. The roads have a hard physical capacity limit. The beaches have a square footage limit. Even the fresh water supply is completely dependent on catching rain.
So instead of trying to endlessly pack more bodies onto the island, which, degrades the experience for everyone and strains the infrastructure to the breaking point,
The strategy inherently shifts to hyper-premiumization.
you basically raise the floor on pricing so high that it acts as a filter.
Exactly. Whether it's an explicitly coordinated government strategy or just the natural byproduct of a constrained market realizing its own pricing power, the result is exactly the same. You price out the middle-class traveler.
Right, the backpackers, the budget-conscious families, the college kids looking for a cheap spring break.
Yeah, they simply cannot clear the financial hurdle of entry anymore. The island becomes this enclave for a demographic that just doesn't flinch at a $20 cocktail.
But, okay, the research introduces this massive wild card into the equation for the 2026 and 2027 seasons, the Fairmont Southampton.
Oh, yes! The giant awakens.
Right. It is the biggest hotel property on the island, and it has been shuttered for a while, but it's reopening in the second half of 2026, and it is dumping 593 rooms back into a very thin inventory.
We really cannot overstate how huge a structural shift that is for a tiny island. I mean, 593 rooms might barely register as a boutique hotel in Vegas, right?
Or like a single wing of a Disney resort in Orlando.
Exactly. But in Bermuda, that represents a massive percentage of their total national bed count coming back online, all at the exact same time.
The source material actually calls this the wait-and-win tactic. It suggests that if you are price-sensitive, waiting until 2027 might soften the rates across the board.
It's an interesting theory.
Yeah, but I really have to challenge the logic here. If the entire destination is realized it can make record-breaking profits by catering to fewer, richer people, why would adding 500 rooms bring prices down?
That's a fair question.
Wouldn't the hoteliers just look at the Fairmont reopening and say, fantastic, more luxury rooms, let's all keep our rates at $800 a night and just keep printing money?
It is a great challenge, and it really brings us to the core of supply and demand elasticity in a closed ecosystem. You are right that the overall long-term strategy is premiumization. The ceiling isn't going to drop,
All right.
but a sudden influx of nearly 600 rooms creates an immediate, unavoidable, localized supply shock.
Because they actually have to put bodies in those beds to pay off all the massive renovation costs, right?
Precisely. The Fairmont Southampton has to service its debt, and to fill nearly 600 rooms consistently, especially during those shoulder seasons when demand naturally dips, they cannot rely solely on the ultra-wealthy top 1%.
Right. There just aren't enough of them traveling to Bermuda at any given moment to fill that specific property year-round.
Exactly. So they will have to offer competitive introductory rates, group discounts, conference packages, stuff like that, just to establish a baseline of occupancy.
And that forces everyone else to play ball.
Right. The other mid-tier and luxury hotels on the island have been enjoying this massive scarcity premium while the Fairmont was dark. They could charge exorbitant rates because, frankly, where else were you going to stay?
Yeah, they had a captive audience.
But once those 593 rooms open, that monopoly on scarcity just breaks. The other properties will suddenly have to compete for those exact same guests.
So while a standard room won't suddenly become a bargain basement steal,
No, definitely not.
but that 10.1% year-over-year price hike engine kind of stalls out. The floor, the absolute minimum entry-level rate for a decent room, has to soften, or at least stabilize, to maintain occupancy across the whole island.
That's the theory, and the data supports it.
So this scarcity premium hasn't just been affecting the hotel rates, it completely dictates the strategy of when you should even attempt to visit. You are basically playing a high-stakes game of timing against both the economy and the elements.
And that requires a major reality check about geography.
Oh, this is my favorite part of the dossier. Because I think a huge percentage of travelers mentally group Bermuda in with the Bahamas or Jamaica or the Virgin Islands.
Oh, absolutely.
They picture it smack in the middle of the warm Caribbean Sea.
It is probably the single most common geographical misconception in North American travel.
Yeah.
And honestly, it is the #1 reason people leave Bermuda deeply disappointed.
The map in the dossier is very clear. Bermuda is not in the Caribbean. It is 640 miles due east of Cape Hatteras, North Carolina.
Yep. Sitting completely isolated in the open North Atlantic Ocean.
Which means it does not have a tropical Caribbean climate. It has a subtropical climate that is heavily influenced by the volatile North Atlantic and the warm Gulf Stream.
So it experiences real, genuine seasonality.
But before we even get to the weather calendar, we really have to address the absolute baseline rule the source material lays out, the skip-if signal.
This is crucial.
I love how blunt the data is here. It states unconditionally, skip Bermuda entirely if your total trip budget is under $250 per person per day. Yeah. If you don't have that, it said don't even book the flight.
And we need to be crystal clear about what that means, that $250 is not a comfortable recommendation. It is the mathematical floor for survival on the island without resorting to extreme deprivation.
Right.
We're going to break down the exact granular costs a bit later, but if you take nothing else away from this, hold that number in your mind. $250 per person every single day.
It's just to exist there.
Just to exist.
Okay, so assuming you can clear that massive financial hurdle, your next biggest adversary is the calendar. Let's look at what the research identifies as the optimal window to go.
Okay, let's hear it.
The sweet spot is late April, May, early June, and then the other side of the peak summer, September and October.
Right, so during those specific shoulder months, you are looking at air temperatures in the 70s and low 80s Fahrenheit.
Which is perfect.
It is. The ocean has either warmed up enough to be refreshing in the spring, or it hasn't cooled down yet from the summer heat in the fall.
But the real victory in this window is economic, isn't it?
Absolutely. The hotel rates have backed off their July and August peaks. The crowds are way thinner. You are essentially getting 90% of the peak summer experience for perhaps 70% of the peak summer cost.
And you are skipping the stifling, oppressive humidity of August.
Yeah, nobody wants that. It is the only time the value equation in Bermuda truly makes sense for a mid-range traveler.
But if you miss that window, you fall into what the dossier grimly calls the dead zone.
The dead zone. That sounds ominous.
December through March. You might go online in February, see a round-trip flight from New York for incredibly cheap, and think you have completely outsmarted the algorithm.
And that is exactly how the island traps you. Because of that North Atlantic geography we talked about, the winter air temperatures frequently drop into the low 60s.
That's sweater weather, not swimsuit weather.
Exactly. The wind can be howling. And the ocean water. It is entirely too cold for the average person to swim in without a full wetsuit.
So you are not going to be lounging on a towel on the pink sand in a bikini in February.
Definitely not. But the weather isn't even the worst part of the dead zone.
Oh, really? What's worse than being cold on a beach vacation?
It's the infrastructure response to the weather. The data shows that restaurants, beach clubs, and even major hotels use this period to basically hibernate.
Hibernate, like they just shut down.
You have to view it through the lens of local business economics. I mean, if the tourist volume drops by 80%, our restaurant cannot afford to pay staff and run the air conditioning for 3 tables a night.
Makes sense.
So they drastically slash their hours, or they simply board up the windows, do their annual maintenance and painting, and just wait for April.
Oh, wow. So you might arrive with your cheap February flight, only to find that the famous seafood place you wanted to visit is closed.
The ferry schedule is operating on a skeletal winter timetable.
And the island just feels like a ghost town. You saved money on the flight, but you basically arrived at a closed theme park.
That's a perfect analogy. And then on the flip side of the calendar, you have the gamble.
Right. August through October. The weather is boiling hot, the ocean is like glorious bath water, and the island is fully operational.
But you are playing Russian roulette with the Atlantic hurricane season,
which historically peaks between late August and early October.
Now, in fairness to Bermuda, their engineering and building codes are arguably among the best in the world for storm resilience.
The entire island is essentially built of solid limestone block, right?
Exactly. The roofs are engineered stone. They do not build flimsy wood frame structures. So the physical danger to a tourist huddled inside a solid limestone hotel room during a hurricane is remarkably low compared to, say, other coastal destinations.
Right. You are physically safe, but your vacation is still completely obliterated.
Exactly. And it doesn't even require a direct hit. A massive storm system turning hundreds of miles away in the Atlantic can cause the airlines to cancel all incoming and outgoing flights for 3 to 4 days just out of caution. It churns up the ocean, generating massive ground swells and dangerous rip currents that force the government to close every single beach on the South Shore.
So you're paying $1,000 a night to sit in a very safe limestone room watching Netflix while the wind howls instead of drinking a rum swizzle on the beach.
It is a devastating loss of invested capital for a traveler.
Let's assume you managed to thread the needle. Okay. You pick the perfect week in May. The weather is flawless, no storms in sight. You still have to navigate the crowds.
Ah, yes. The crowds.
And the research splits the tourist population into two entirely distinct crowd engines that operate on completely different logic. First, you have the air visitors.
The air visitors are the traditional tourists. They cluster heavily in July and August, and they absolutely flood the island during long U.S. holiday weekends like Memorial Day and the Labor Day.
And their presence has a direct, painful impact on the pricing algorithm.
Oh, definitely.
The data points out that a standard commercial flight from New York that might cost you $150 round trip on a random Tuesday in November can easily double or triple to $400 or $500 during a peak summer weekend.
And when they arrive, they're the ones crowding the capital city of Hamilton, packing the restaurants along Front Street at lunchtime, and filling up the high-end beach clubs on the South Shore.
But here is the critical distinction the dossier makes. Air visitors are a predictable, distributed crowd.
Right. They arrive in staggered flights of maybe 150 people at a time. They disperse across dozens of different hotels, guest houses, and rental properties spread out over the island's 21 square miles.
So the infrastructure is designed to absorb them slowly.
Yes. The second crowd engine, though, is the cruise visitors, and their impact is a totally different beast.
The dossier paints a genuinely chaotic picture here. The massive mega cruise ships dock at King's Wharf, which is located in the Royal Naval Dockyard at the extreme western tip of the island.
And when those ships tie up and open their doors, thousands of people pour off the gangways all at exactly the same time.
It is a massive, instantaneous, localized shock to the island's carrying capacity.
Imagine a quiet, orderly little village suddenly experiencing a population influx of 5,000 people within a 45-minute window.
It's like a stadium letting out into a single neighborhood.
Exactly. They instantly swamp the physical footprint of the dockyard. And because the dockyard itself is isolated, all 5,000 of those people immediately need transportation.
Right.
They overwhelm the cross-harbor ferries heading to Hamilton. They completely max out the capacity of the minibuses and beach shuttles trying to run down to Horseshoe Bay on the South Shore. They just create a massive traffic bottleneck on the roads.
Which dictates very specific booking tactics if you want to retain your sanity.
It sure does.
The research advises that if you are flying in, you absolutely must lock in your hotel and your dinner reservations 3 to 4 months in advance for any summer trip.
Yeah.
And if you are one of those cruise passengers, the brutal reality is you have to set an alarm and get off that ship the absolute second the gangway drops just to beat the crush of your own fellow passengers to the transportation hubs.
And if you are a couple traveling without children, the directive is clear. Aim for May or September. You balance the price, you get good weather, and you dodge the worst of those crowds.
But families, looking at this data, families are just completely trapped by the system, aren't they?
They really are. Unless they are willing to pull their kids out of school in September, families are structurally tied to the summer holiday calendar.
Right.
That puts them square in the crosshairs of July and August. They face the absolute peak room rates, the most punitive airline pricing, the thickest, most humid weather, and the maximum density of crowds. It is the most expensive and exhausting way to experience the island.
Okay, let's play this out. You've chosen your dates. You survived the airline pricing surge.
Yeah.
You've packed your bags. Now we have to talk about the physical arrival and the profound logistics shock that hits you.
Because the real test of this destination begins the very moment you step out of the airport sliding doors.
Exactly. The arrival experience itself is actually deceptively calm. You land at L.F. Wade International Airport, located on the far east end of the island near the historic town of St. George's.
And it is a very modern, bright, well-designed, and efficient terminal.
It really is. And there's actually a moment of unexpected ease here. A baked-in $35 departure tax.
Oh, yeah. You don't even notice it?
Right. You don't have to queue up to pay it. You don't have to think about it because it is already hidden inside your airline ticket price. It's a rare moment of financial friction being quietly handled behind the scenes. But then you click your bags, you walk out to the curb, and you hit the most crucial defining logistical hurdle of the entire travel experience, the no rental car law.
Yep. Tourists legally cannot hire self-drive cars in Bermuda.
Full stop.
No exceptions. No special permits. You cannot rent a car.
It is such a jarring reality. Think about it. I was trying to conceptualize how this feels to an American traveler used to endless highways.
It's quite a shock to the system.
It is exactly like being dropped into a massive, sprawling, incredibly beautiful theme park. But the rules of this park state that you are strictly forbidden from walking anywhere.
Oh, that's good.
Every single time you want to go to a new ride or grab a snack or just go back to your hotel room to take a nap, you are forced to pay for a heavily unionized, incredibly expensive VIP golf cart to drive you there.
That is a brilliant way to frame it because it perfectly captures the psychological feeling of a sudden, total loss of autonomy. And that's immediately followed by an unexpected and continuous financial drain.
Exactly.
You realize you are entirely dependent on a system that you have no control over. Let's look at the sheer transit economics of that dependency.
Yeah, let's break down the taxi reality. You get in the cab at the airport. The meter starts at $7.90, just for the privilege of sitting on the vinyl seat. And then it ticks up at roughly $2.75 per mile. And wait, the data says there are surcharges on top of that if you dare to arrive on a Sunday or a public holiday.
So if you were taking a taxi from the airport on the Far East End all the way to one of the popular luxury resorts in Southampton on the West End.
The research shows that ride commonly lands in the $50 to $70 range, one way.
And we have to do the full math here. You have to eventually go back to the airport at the end of your trip.
Obviously.
So you have spent somewhere between $100 and $140 solely on airport transfers before you have even seen a grain of sand or looked at a restaurant menu.
I looked at this and immediately thought, okay, I'll just hack the system. I'll take public transit. The research mentions these iconic, picturesque pink and blue buses and the cross harbor ferries. Why is public transit a false economy here for a new arrival?
Because the public transit system was designed for moving locals to work and school, not for moving tourists with luggage.
I see.
Yes, the buses are relatively cheap, and the ferries offer stunning views. But imagine wrestling two 50-pound roller suitcases onto a crowded commuter bus.
That sounds miserable.
It is. The aisles are narrow, there is no dedicated luggage rack, and even if you manage to get on, the bus stops are often on narrow, winding roads with absolutely no sidewalks.
Oh, wow.
You then have to haul those suitcases from the bus stop up a steep, humid hill to your guest house. It is physically agonizing and socially awkward.
I can imagine.
The public transit is fantastic once you are settled and carrying nothing but a beach towel. But for arrival, it is a nightmare.
So you surrender. You take the $70 taxi. But as you are sitting in that cab, watching the meter tick up relentlessly, you are looking out the window and you do start to see what you were paying for.
You see the vibe.
Exactly. The research highlights the undeniable positives. The island is incredibly lush and green, the roads are perfectly orderly, and the sense of safety is palpable. You see those famous, beautiful pastel-colored cottages with the brilliant white stepped roofs.
And those roofs are a perfect example of how form follows absolute necessity in Bermuda.
Really? How so?
Those white-stepped layers aren't just an architectural flourish. They are actually engineered to slow down and catch rainfall, funneling it into underground cisterns.
Because there's no fresh water?
Exactly.
Okay.
Because the island is solid limestone, there are virtually no natural freshwater springs or lakes.
So their architecture is literally a survival mechanism turned into an aesthetic.
Exactly. They have turned a massive geographical vulnerability into a beautiful branding asset.
That's brilliant. And the environment continues to impress from the taxi window. There is incredibly low visible crime. Every single person speaks English, and the local currency is pegged on a strict 1-to-1 ratio with the US dollar.
Yeah, that makes things easy.
You can just hand over American cash at the grocery store or the bar, and no one blinks an eye. It feels incredibly frictionless.
But we have to recognize that it is a carefully curated illusion of frictionlessness. What is truly fascinating from a behavioral economics standpoint is how this initial arrival experience permanently alters the traveler's psychology for the rest of the trip.
Because the meter is running in your head.
Exactly. You realize very quickly that a simple, spontaneous, quick trip to town to grab a coffee or buy a postcard just doesn't exist.
You can't just hop in your rental car.
Every single physical movement requires planning and significant capital. This realization creates the subtle underlying anxiety. You stop thinking of your vacation as this free-flowing, open-ended experience, and you start mentally calculating the transport cost and time friction of every single decision you make.
Do I really want that coffee if it costs me $20 in taxi fare to get to the cafe?
Precisely. And because moving around is so financially punishing and logistically heavy, The location of your hotel-like, where you physically choose to sleep, ceases to be just about the thread count of the sheets or the view from the balcony.
It becomes the single most critical strategic and financial decision you will make,
Exact,
which
yeah.
segues perfectly into exploring the actual inventory. Let's look at the 4 tiers of accommodation the data maps out.
And as we look at this inventory, we have to return to that concept of the localized supply shock we discussed earlier. Because the island is small and heavily zoned to prevent overdevelopment, the total supply of hotel rooms is incredibly thin compared to a place like Cancun.
Right.
That baseline scarcity inherently drives prices up across every single tier of accommodation.
But before we even get to the sticker price of the rooms, we have to talk about the hidden trap waiting at checkout, the tax and service stack. This is brutal.
It's a tough one to swallow.
The data explicitly warns that whatever nightly price you see quoted in bold font on Expedia or the hotel's website, you need to mentally add nearly 20% to that figure to understand your actual cost.
It is a phenomenal stacking of fees. Let's break it down. There is a 7.25% government occupancy tax, a 2.5% tourism guest fee, and then, almost universally, the hotel will mandate a 10% daily service charge.
Wait. If I'm paying a 10% mandatory service charge at a hotel, and then we know from later in the data that restaurants also add a 15% charge, where's all this money going? Are people tipping on top of this?
That is a vital distinction to make. The hotel service charge is essentially pooled to pay the baseline wages of the housekeeping and bell staff.
So it's not a tip.
No, it is not an extra tip for exceptional service. It is the hotel subsidizing its payroll directly through a mandatory guest fee.
Wow.
And the government taxes. That is just the price of keeping an isolated rock in the ocean functioning. It pays for the roads, the port infrastructure, the diesel power plants.
But for the traveler, the mechanics of where the money goes don't soften the blow at all.
Not even slightly. A room that advertises itself at $400 a night is quietly pulling $480 out of your checking account every morning before you've even had breakfast.
Let's see how that stack impacts the actual traveler profiles, starting with Tier 1,
Right.
the backpacker or budget traveler.
Okay.
The research models this budget at $120 to $180 a night. But it makes a glaring observation. There is a complete and total lack of a hostel scene on the island.
Right. You are not going to find a vibrant backpacker district with $30 bunk beds and communal kitchens. It simply doesn't exist.
The only options at this price point are private guest houses or small basement apartment rentals, usually tucked away in residential parishes like Warwick, Paget, or on the deep fringes of the capital, Hamilton. And the physical trade-off here is severe.
It is a geographical penalty. These budget options are, almost by definition, located far away from the premium South Shore beaches.
Right.
So you might pat yourself on the back for saving $100 a night on the room rate, but you are going to spend a significant portion of that savings. Not to mention hours of your precious vacation time standing on the side of a humid road waiting for a bus or paying to rent a scooter just to get to the sand.
So the savings are basically an illusion swallowed by the logistics.
Exactly.
Tier 2 is the mid-range couple. In the optimal shoulder season, this is modeled at $250 to $400 a night. The dossier names well-known properties like the Grotto Bay Beach Resort in Hamilton Parish or Cocoa Reef.
But it comes with a massive caveat. In the peak heat of July and August, that $400 ceiling is easily shattered.
Easily.
A mid-range room can easily command $600. And the trade-off at this tier, the sticker rate is even more deceptive because these resort properties love to add daily resort fees for the use of the pool towels or the Wi-Fi.
Wait, completely separate from the 20% tax stack we already discussed.
Completely separate.
That's rough. Okay, Tier 3 is the family tier, and this is where the math gets genuinely depressing for parents.
It really does.
Families usually require pools to keep the kids entertained, kitchens to mitigate food costs, or connecting suites so everyone can sleep. They were looking at places like Grotto Bay or renting large homes in Southampton or Warwick. The data estimates this costs $450 to $800 a night.
And the families face a dual-pronged assault here. As we noted, they suffer brutal summer premium pricing because they are tied to school holidays.
Right, they can't go in October.
And because family-sized inventory, like places with kitchens and multiple bedrooms, is so structurally limited on the island, they absolutely must commit capital and book 3 to 4 months in advance. There is no such thing as a last-minute family deal to Bermuda.
Finally, we have Tier 4, luxury, $700 to well over $1,000 per night. This is Bermuda's true core brand identity.
This is where the island wants to operate.
Right. This tier features the Rosewood Bermuda at Tucker's Point, the Hamilton Princess with its massive art collection, and the St. Regis out in St. George's.
And at this tier, all that logistical friction we've been discussing, it begins to magically disappear, paved over by sheer capital.
Okay, I have to stop and ask the obvious, glaring question here.
Go for it.
If I am a traveler paying $400 or $500 a night as a supposedly mid-range traveler,
Right.
and I am getting slapped with a 20% tax stack and I have to pay $70 for a taxi, how can anyone logically justify this over going to a luxurious, fully all-inclusive resort in the Dominican Republic or Mexico for the exact same price?
It is the defining existential question of Bermuda tourism. Why choose the friction?
Exactly. Why?
And the justification always boils down to two highly specific premiums: extreme safety and geographical convenience for the U.S. East Coast.
Okay, that makes sense.
If you live in New York or Boston, you are paying a massive premium to endure a 2-hour flight instead of a 5-hour flight. You are buying back half a day of your life on either end of the trip.
And the safety aspect.
You're paying a premium for the profound psychological comfort of knowing you can walk down a dark road at midnight without constantly looking over your shoulder. You are buying time and peace of mind, but you are paying dearly for it.
And as we said, your location strategy dictates how much time you actually save. The research breaks down the geography brilliantly.
It's very thorough.
If you choose to stay in Hamilton, the capital, it is highly walkable. You have access to incredible restaurants and bars, but there is no beach. You are staring at a harbor.
Right.
If you stay on the South Shore in Southampton or Warwick, you have immediate access to world-class pink sand, but you are totally transport dependent if you want anything more complex than a hotel hamburger for dinner.
Yep.
St. George's is dripping with history and colonial charm, but it is deeply isolated on the east end of the island. And the dockyard, while it has infrastructure for the cruise ships, is essentially completely dead and deserted at night once those ships power down.
Every single location is a compromise. There's no perfect spot. You have to decide which form of friction you are personally more willing to tolerate. The friction of a long, expensive commute to the beach every morning, or the friction of a long, expensive commute to dinner every night.
And speaking of dinner, the sticker shock on the hotel room and the taxi is honestly just the opening act.
Oh, we're just getting started.
Because eventually you have to eat, which requires us to look at the macroeconomic reality of the supply chain. Let's examine the 80% import reality for food and groceries.
If the accommodation prices are a shock, the food prices are often where travelers simply lose their patience and feel like they're being extorted.
I can imagine.
But to understand why your breakfast costs so much, we have to strip away the emotion and look at the structural, physical reality of how a remote island feeds itself.
Right. The 80% rule. 8 out of every 10 items consumed on the island arrives by cargo ship.
Let's actually walk through the logistics of that. Imagine a simple carton of milk or a pint of strawberries. You are not just paying for the agricultural cost of that food. You are paying to put it in a specialized refrigerated shipping container in New Jersey or Florida. You are paying the fuel surcharge for the cargo ship to cross 600 miles of rough ocean.
Wow.
You are paying the union wages of the stevedores who unload it at the docks in Hamilton. You are paying the local truck driver to move it to the supermarket. And, most crucially, you are paying the astronomical electricity costs required to keep those supermarket refrigerators running 247 on an island that generates almost all of its power from highly expensive imported diesel fuel.
Every single one of those steps adds a margin.
Exactly. All of that logistical overhead gets baked directly into the retail price of a tomato. The unavoidable result is a grocery ecosystem where prices are structurally fixed at 30% to 50% above what you would see in a high cost of living city in the US or the UK.
The grocery shock is very, very real. The dossier gives us exact retail prices from local supermarkets like Lindo's, Marketplace, and Miles Market, which is the upscale gourmet option.
Let's hear the numbers.
A standard loaf of bread is $5 to $7. A dozen eggs will run you $6 to $8. A single gallon of milk, $10 to $13.
And that's just the basics.
Right. A block of basic cheese is over $10. And the research specifically notes that fresh fruit is priced like a luxury good.
Because in this logistical chain, it is a luxury good. A carton of raspberries has an incredibly high spoilage rate.
That makes sense, yeah.
If a cargo ship is delayed by a winter storm for 2 days, half that shipment rots. The supermarket has to price the surviving berries high enough to cover the total loss of the spoiled ones.
So if raw groceries are that punishingly expensive, the restaurant pricing must be astronomical because you are adding labor and real estate costs on top. And the data confirms it is.
He really is.
Even hyper-casual food is premium priced. The research highlights the island's most famous local dish, the Art Mills Spicy Dicey Fish Sandwich. It is legendary. It's a huge stack of fried fish on raisin bread.
Yeah.
But it is $18 to $26 just for the sandwich. No sides. A bowl of local fish chowder, which is traditionally served with a splash of sherry pepper sauce and black rum, is $12 to $18. A traditional Sunday codfish breakfast, which is a local staple, is $22 to $30.
And remember, that is the casual paper napkin dining tier. If you look at beverages, the costs escalate quickly because alcohol is heavily taxed.
So the drinks are pricey too.
A classic dark and stormy or a rum swizzle, the signature drinks of the island, will consistently run $10 to $18 each. A completely standard cup of drip coffee is $4 to $6. A bottle of flat water is $2 to $4.
When you actually sit down for a proper meal, the numbers get staggering. A basic cafe lunch, maybe a salad and a sandwich, is modeled at $25 to $45 per person.
Wow.
A mid-range sit-down dinner is $50 to $90 per person. And if you want fine dining, steaks, fresh local catch, a nice atmosphere, you are looking at $110 to well over $200 per person effortlessly.
And then there is the etiquette and tipping structure lurking at the bottom of the receipt.
Oh, this is a psychological trap that catches so many well-meaning North American tourists. They look at a massive $200 dinner bill, their brain goes into autopilot, and they reflexively write in a 20% tip on the receipt line.
But the data screams at you to check the bill. Almost all restaurants in Bermuda automatically include a 15% to 17% service charge right into the total.
If you aren't paying attention and you add your standard 20% tip on top of the built-in 15% service charge, you have just tipped 35% on a heavily inflated bill.
Which is just painful. Taxis, however, operate differently. The data notes they do expect about a 15% tip on the meter since it's not automatically included.
Good to know.
And uniquely, if you rent a scooter, it is customary to tip the gas station attendants $1 or $2 when they pump your gas because you aren't allowed to pump it yourself.
So, facing this wall of food costs, the research offers one major, highly practical piece of advice, which it dubs the kitchen hack.
Yes, the kitchen hack.
It argues that renting an apartment or a hotel suite that has a kitchenette and forcing yourself to shop at Lindo's or Marketplace is the only genuine, mathematically sound money saver on the entire island.
It really is.
Yes, staring at a $13 gallon of milk is incredibly painful, but paying $45 per person for a buffet breakfast at the hotel every single morning for 7 days is financially ruinous.
Cooking even just half your meals, making your own eggs in the morning, packing a sandwich for the beach, drastically changes the financial trajectory and stress level of the trip.
Right.
But it requires a psychological concession. You have to accept that you are going to spend a portion of your highly expensive premium vacation doing mundane household chores.
You're paying luxury prices to wash your own dishes.
Exactly. It's a bitter pill, but it keeps the budget from exploding.
Which brings us perfectly to the daily budgets. We need a reality check. Let's take all of these disparate elements we've discussed, the 20% hotel tax stacks, the $70 airport taxis, the $13 milk, the $26 fish sandwiches, and combine them.
Let's see what it adds up to.
We need to see what this friction actually looks like in practice over a 24-hour period. Instead of just listing these budgets out, let's walk through what the traveler actually experiences. The research models 5 specific profiles, all calculated in US dollars. Let's start with the backpacker or deep budget traveler, modeled at $150 to $200 per day.
To hit that number, you are living on a knife's edge of extreme discipline. You wake up in a basic guest house room far from the beach, which costs you $60 to $90.
Yeah.
You absolutely must eat breakfast from groceries you bought yourself. You walk to the bus stop, paying $19 for a daily transit pass. You ride the bus for 45 minutes to get to the beach. For lunch, you eat a packed sandwich, or maybe splurge $15 on something cheap. Your activity is entirely free swimming in the ocean or walking around St. George's.
And we need to emphasize a massive warning from the data here. This $150 to $200 is an absolute uncompromising floor. It assumes you never ever take a taxi and you skip the bars entirely.
Bermuda severely punishes looseness.
If you decide one night, you know what, I'm tired, let's just grab 2 beers at the pub and take a taxi back to the guest house instead of waiting for the bus, you have instantly, in 1 hour, blown your daily budget by $60.
There is zero margin for error at that tier.
Mm-hmm.
Let's step up to the mid-range traveler, modeled at $250 to $350 per day per person. So for a couple traveling together, that means a total daily combined spend of roughly $450 to $650.
Let's walk through their day. They wake up in a nicer hotel, maybe with a pool, which costs $130 to $200 per person.
Yeah.
They probably have a kitchenette, so they make breakfast, but they buy a coffee out.
Right.
They spend $20 to $35 on transit passes, or maybe split the cost of a scooter rental. They go to the beach. They pay $25 to $40 to rent 2 nice loungers and an umbrella. For food, they allocate $70 to $110 each. That means a casual cafe lunch and a decent but not extravagant sit-down dinner.
But look at how quickly that ceiling approaches. You sit down for that mid-range dinner. You are already at $500 for the day between the room, the loungers, the scooter, and lunch.
Yeah.
The dinner bill comes to $120. And then you decide to order 2 of those famous $18 rum swizzles. Boom. With the 15% service charge, you have just shattered the $650 daily estimate.
Wow. So a realistic, comfortable number for a couple who actually wants to enjoy their vacation without stressing over the price of a side salad is $550 to $600 a day minimum.
Absolutely.
Then we have the family of 4, 2 adults, 2 kids. This is modeled at $600 to $900 a day, which translates to an eye-watering $4,500 to $7,000 for a single week.
That's a huge commitment.
The room alone, because they need space, is $400 to $650.
And families are the ones who feel the pinch of the logistical friction most acutely. Moving 4 human beings across the island in taxis is exorbitant. A single round trip to a restaurant could cost $100.
Which means they probably take the bus, right?
They try. But moving a family of 4 on the public buses requires military precision, infinite patience, and timing the schedules perfectly around naps and meltdowns.
Their food budget is modeled very tightly at $120 to $180 a day for 4 people, which means they are absolutely relying heavily on that kitchen hack and avoiding sit-down restaurants.
It's the only way.
Transit passes eat up another $40 to $60, though the data notes kids under 5 ride free. An activity like visiting the aquarium or renting snorkel gear takes the last $40 to $80.
And then sitting far above this fray is the luxury tier, $1,000 to $1,800+ a day per couple.
The room is $700 to $1,000. They spend $200 to $350 on fine dining without blinking.
Right.
They bypass the bus entirely, spending $80 to $150 a day, having taxis ferry them directly from the lobby to the beach club. They drop $150 on a spa visit, and the research simply notes, Bermuda effortlessly absorbs this.
It is entirely true. The island's premium infrastructure is almost perfectly, seamlessly calibrated to cater to this exact demographic.
So the friction is gone for them.
If you have infinite capital, the friction we've been describing simply ceases to exist. The taxis are waiting, the tables are open, the service is impeccable.
The final budget profile is a newer phenomenon, the digital nomad, modeled at $4,500 to $7,000 a month.
That's a different way to experience it.
They spend $2,500 to $4,000 securing a long-term apartment rental. They allocate $1,000 to $1,500 for groceries and very modest occasional dining out, and they buy a $69 monthly transit pass for the buses.
So when we zoom out and look at these budgets collectively, what emerges as the actual good value versus bad value on the island?
The data summarizes this incredibly clearly. The absolute best values on the island are the transit passes, $19 for a 1-day pass, or $62 for a 7-day pass that gives you unlimited access to both the buses and the scenic ferries.
That's a steal.
And of course, the stunning public beaches themselves, which are completely free to enter.
And the absolute worst values.
Relying on those airport taxis and treating daily fine dining as a default rather than a special occasion.
But here's the critical defining point of this entire deep dive. Even if you memorize these budgets, even if you execute the kitchen hack flawlessly and buy your bus pass on day 1.
What goes wrong?
There are 3 specific, deeply embedded logistical traps that ruin trips for the unprepared. You can have all the money in the world and still fall victim to these.
Let's examine those closely. Trap number 1, the no rental car trap. We talked about the legal mechanism earlier. Tourists simply cannot rent cars. But the reality trap is behavioral.
How so?
It occurs when travelers land, exhausted from travel, implicitly expecting they will just figure it out when they get there, like they do in Florida or Mexico. They step out, realize there is no rental desk, and find they have to bleed $50 to $70 in a taxi just to get to their bed.
If you approach Bermuda with a spontaneous, let's just see where the day takes us attitude, and you rely on taxis for that spontaneity, your budget will hemorrhage cash at a terrifying rate.
So what's the fix?
The fix, according to the research, is rigorous, almost obsessive pre-planning. You must pre-book your airport transfers so the cost is known. You must buy those unlimited transit passes immediately. And crucially, you have to mentally divide the island into zones and group your activities geographically. You do not go from your hotel in Hamilton out to the dockyard for a museum and then back to Hamilton for lunch in a single day. You will spend 4 hours and $80 just in transit.
Trap number 2 is infinitely more dangerous physically. The scooter road rash trap. Because cars are banned, the mechanism is that renting a motorized scooter, which runs about $30 a day, becomes the default romanticized way to find freedom and autonomy.
But the reality is incredibly grim.
Right.
The infrastructure is fiercely unforgiving. The roads are incredibly narrow. There are essentially no shoulders. They wind sharply around blind corners lined with jagged coral rock walls.
That sounds intense.
Oh, and you have to drive on the left side of the road, which completely scrambles the muscle memory of a North American driver.
As a result, tourist crashes, which the locals casually refer to as road rash, are incredibly frequent. And I imagine this isn't just about scraped knee and ruined vacation photos, right?
Not at all. It is a major medical and financial event. While the local hospital is competent, medical care on the island for non-residents is exorbitantly expensive. A severe crash involving broken bones might require a specialized medical evacuation flight back to the United States.
The dossier's fix for this trap is completely non-negotiable. Take the mandatory riding lesson at the rental shop seriously. If you wobble, don't rent it.
Yes.
Wear your helmet at all times. Never, under any circumstances, ride in the rain when the roads get slick, and never ride at night when visibility drops. And honestly, the best advice is, if you are scared or hesitant, do not force it.
Absolutely. Do not let the social pressure of, well, this is how everyone gets around here, force you into a dangerous situation. Take the bus.
Which leads us directly to trap number 3, which we touched on earlier but need to highlight as a specific danger zone. The cruise crowd and last ferry trap.
This one is so stressful.
The mechanism here is the sheer volume of the cruise ships. Thousands of people surge into the dockyard simultaneously. The reality trap occurs in the late afternoon, specifically around 4 or 5 p.m.
Right. Everyone who rushed off the ship to go to Horseshoe Bay suddenly realizes they need to get back. There are massive sweating queues for the ferries and shuttles trying to return to the dockyard.
And a genuine panic sets in as people try to catch the ferries before the schedule dramatically thins out or stops altogether at 7 p.m.
I can just viscerally imagine the stress of that moment. You've had this beautiful, relaxing beach day. You are covered in sand, you're sun-baked, you're tired.
Yeah.
And suddenly, the relaxation vanishes, and you are trapped in a sweltering line with 400 other panicked people aggressively sweating over a ferry timetable because your ship literally pulls up its anchor and leaves in 2 hours.
If we look at these 3 traps collectively, the taxi hemorrhage, the scooter crashes, the ferry panic, what is fascinating is how they all share the exact same root cause.
They do.
They're all the direct result of a traveler trying to blindly apply mainland vacation logic to a tiny, highly regulated, geographically isolated island. On the mainland, you rent a car. You drive where you want, when you want. You assume there will always be capacity on public transit.
Bermuda simply does not work that way. It refuses to bend to you. It demands that you adapt to its rhythms, its schedules, and its physical limitations.
Which brings us to the broader picture of well-being on the island. Because while the roads might literally scrape you up, we need to know what else you actually need to worry about. Let's look at safety, comfort, and real risks.
The risk hierarchy in Bermuda is very distinct, and it runs counter to what you might expect in other international destinations. By the hard numbers, it is incredibly safe regarding crime.
The data emphatically confirms this. The #1 statistical danger to a tourist is the road, those scooter accidents we just spent time on. The #2 danger is completely natural. Ocean rip currents on the South Shore.
In fact, this specific danger is explicitly flagged by U.S. government travel advisories.
Because the Atlantic Ocean is immensely powerful. When a storm system is churning offshore, even if the storm is hundreds of miles away and the sky above you is perfectly blue, it pushes massive heavy swells onto those southern beaches.
This creates invisible, violently strong undertows that can easily pull out even very strong, confident swimmers.
But regarding crime and personal comfort, violent crime directed against tourists is highly uncommon. There is some petty theft. The research advises you to lock your scooter, don't leave valuables visible in the basket, and keep an eye on your beach bags when swimming. But overall, the data notes it is highly comfortable and relaxed for solo female travelers and families.
The environment just feels fundamentally secure. It allows for a level of deep psychological relaxation that you don't always find in other popular sun destinations, where the tourist zones often feel like heavily guarded enclaves surrounded by poverty.
On the medical front, we mentioned this briefly with the scooters, but we need to underline it. King Edward VII Memorial Hospital in Paget is competent and modern, but it is expensive for foreigners, and highly complex trauma cases require a medevac flight back to the U.S.
Travel medical insurance is absolutely mandatory. Do not skip it to save $50.
Another major factor contributing to this safe, orderly profile is the nightlife, or rather, the lack of it. The nightlife is very modest, mostly concentrated in a few pubs and clubs on Front Street in Hamilton. Bermuda is not a wild, all-night party island.
Which directly aids the low-crime environment. I kept reading this and thinking, Bermuda is essentially like a strict, elite, but very safe prep school, you know?
That's hilarious.
You are absolutely not going to get mugged in the hallway between classes. It's pristine, but if you run by the pool or if you rebelliously ride your scooter in the rain, you are going to get hurt. You will be sent to the nurse, and it is going to cost your parents an absolute fortune.
It is exactly the dynamic.
Yeah.
The rules of the island are very clear. They are strictly enforced by reality, and if you follow them, you are perfectly secure. So let's say you follow the rules. You're safe. You've paid your 20% hotel taxes without complaining. You've survived the scooter rental. You've masterfully navigated the ferry schedule. What is the actual payoff for all this friction and expense? Let's look at the best moments and the honest disappointments, starting with the triumphs.
The beaches, they truly, genuinely deliver on the marketing promise. The sand is incredibly fine. It really does have that pink hue from crushed coral and shells. And the water clarity is staggering.
But the expert advice here is crucial to actually enjoying them. You must skip the main section of Horseshoe Bay. It is the most famous, but it is a trap.
A total trap.
Instead, the data tells you to hit the connected chain of smaller coves right next to it. You walk slightly east to Warwick Long Bay, Chobson's Cove, and Chaplin Bay. You get the exact same iconic pink sand, the same dramatic, towering limestone rock formations, but you experience a fraction of the crowds.
And for easy, accessible snorkeling right off the beach, the research points directly to Church Bay.
Off the sand, the historic town of St. George's is a massive triumph. It is a designated UNESCO World Heritage Town. It's 400 years old, featuring incredible colonial architecture, winding alleys, and it is entirely free to just wander through and soak in the history.
It's a gorgeous town.
The Crystal and Fantasy Caves in Hamilton Parish, which cost around $24 to $35 to enter, are totally worth the price of admission. You walk on pontoons over crystal-clear underground lakes.
I've heard that's amazing.
And finally, for those confident riders who heed the warnings, taking a scooter along the winding South Shore Road on a clear, sunny day with the ocean breeze hitting you is the iconic cinematic Bermuda memory.
It is breathtaking. But we also have an obligation to look at the honest disappointments, the moments where the reality violently falls short of the glossy brochure.
We mentioned this earlier, but bears repeating. Horseshoe Bay at 1 p.m. on a day when the mega cruise ships are in port is an absolute nightmare. It is towel to towel. You are fighting for space to breathe, let alone relax.
It sounds like an ordeal.
The Royal Naval Dockyard, despite all the heavy marketing pushing you there, is ultimately just a repurposed shopping complex built for the cruise crowds. It is not a full-day cultural destination. It's a place to buy souvenirs.
And then there is the turquoise Caribbean myth. We cannot stress this enough because it ruins so many trips. Winter water in Bermuda is too cold for swimming. Period. Do not expect bath water in February.
The data also explicitly warns against overpaying for expensive bundled boat tours, especially when you have access to stunning free beaches and relatively cheap natural wonders like the caves that you can access on your own via the bus.
If you are listening to all of this, the costs, the logistics, the weather risks, and these highlights just don't seem to outweigh the friction for you, the research provides two direct alternatives that scratch a very similar itch but operate with entirely different economic profiles.
Let's explore those alternatives. The Bahamas versus Newport. Alternative 1 is the Bahamas, specifically looking at Nassau or the Exumas.
The reason the Bahamas is a comparable alternative is that it offers that same easy Atlantic-adjacent quick trip from the U.S. East Coast. It has phenomenal world-class beaches, but crucially, it offers genuine year-round Caribbean warmth. you can comfortably swim in the ocean in January.
And the cost profile is meaningfully cheaper, especially at the mid-range. There are significantly more all-inclusive resort options where you don't have to constantly worry about a $13 gallon of milk or a $70 taxi. You pay one price and you're done.
Right, less daily friction.
But the trade-offs are real. Nassau cruise crowds are massive, arguably even more overwhelming than Bermuda's, and outside the resort compounds, it generally lacks Bermuda's extreme safety and that orderly, quiet prep school vibe.
Alternative 2 is completely different geographically, but it hits the exact same aesthetic and cultural note. Newport, Rhode Island, or perhaps certain towns on Cape Cod.
Right. If you are going for that specific preppy, sailing, pastel sweater, high society aesthetic vibe, Newport matches it perfectly. And the cost. It is estimated to be 30% to 50% cheaper overall.
That's a huge difference.
There are no expensive international flights. There is no punishing 20% hotel tax stack. You are paying normal U.S. mainland grocery prices, and best of all, you can drive your own car. You have total autonomy.
The trade-off, of course, is geographic reality. There is no pink sand in Rhode Island, and the water is definitely not subtropical.
So if we put them head-to-head in a battle royale, Bermuda versus the Bahamas versus Newport, who actually wins?
It depends entirely on what you prioritize as a traveler. Bermuda wins, hands down, if you demand absolute safety above all else, a sense of international exoticism, and you require a flight of under 2 hours from New York or Boston. But it loses on pure financial value to both of the alternatives.
Which brings us to the final brutal math of this dossier, the is it worth it matrix. The data assigns final ratings out of 10 for each traveler profile we've discussed. Let's break down the final scores.
For the backpacker, the score is a dismal 3 out of 10. It is only worth it if you are willing to treat the free public beaches as your sole source of entertainment and strictly religiously use the $62 weekly bus pass.
Wow, so what's the verdict for them?
The final verdict from the research: skip it entirely if your budget is under $150 a day. You are far better off taking that flight money and going to Southeast Asia or Central America where that budget makes you a king.
For the mid-range traveler, which is the core audience of this data, it gets a 6.5 out of 10. It is deemed worth it if and only if you can pull off a shoulder season week in May or September and you are financially and mentally okay with the total spend of $450 to $650 a day for a couple.
And remember, this score might actually get a significant boost if that 2027 Fairmont reopening creates that glut of rooms and drives the baseline prices down.
For the family, it scores a 6 out of 10. The high marks are awarded for the extreme safety and the short flights, which is great for toddlers. The low marks are because dropping $4,500 to $7,000 for a single week can break a family's annual budget. And the rigid no rental car rule is incredibly exhausting when you're managing children and all their gear.
The digital nomad gets a 4.5 out of 10. At $4,500 to $7,000 a month, the island is undeniably beautiful and safe, but it is just too incredibly expensive and frankly too quiet to serve as a viable, vibrant, long-term hub for remote workers.
But then we get to the luxury tier. They scored an 8 out of 10.
Because Bermuda operates flawlessly at the $1,000+ per night level, if you have the capital to pave over the friction, the island is nothing short of spectacular.
So summarizing the ultimate verdict, you have to book this destination with your eyes wide open. You absolutely must understand the 20% tax stack, the brutal reality of food imports, and the unyielding no-car rule before you ever put down your credit card.
Yes.
And if you are price-sensitive in any way, the smartest, most practical strategy in this entire deep dive is to sit on your hands and wait for the 2027 room glut to see if the market softens. That is incredibly actionable advice. But as we wrap up, I want to hand it over to you. Looking at all this data, what is the bigger picture here?
As global tourism rebounds and reshapes itself post-pandemic, we are witnessing this powerful phenomenon of hyper-premiumization taking hold in specific, highly desirable locales around the world. Bermuda is a prime leading indicator of this trend, but it is happening everywhere from certain European cities to isolated mountain towns.
Right.
We are seeing destinations look at their carrying capacity and actively decide to price out the mid-range traveler, the young backpackers, the average middle-class families.
So what does that mean for the places themselves?
Well, the provocative question we have to ask ourselves as travelers is this: if a destination successfully executes the strategy, what happens to the actual cultural soul of the place?
Oh, that's a good point.
When an island or a city transitions from a living, breathing, diverse community into what is essentially an exclusive gated resort strictly for the top 5% of earners, does it lose the very charm and authenticity that made it famous in the first place?
Does it just become a bubble?
Exactly. When you are standing in that beautiful ultra-luxury gala, paying premium prices for the air you breathe, do you eventually realize that you're just standing in a very expensive, very isolated echo chamber? It is a critical question for the future of travel.
It really is. It forces you to ask what you're actually buying when you book a ticket. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring the realities behind those glossy travel brochures. Until next time.